Seville was once a complete failure, homeless, with no memory of his past. However, fate had other plans, for hidden within him was the power of a supreme sorcerer, possessing an infinite magical energy that no one could imagine. Seville's life only truly changed on one fateful day, when during a pouring rainstorm, a mysterious beautiful woman noticed him in a dark alley. This woman quickly discovered that the bright eyes of the boy matched her own. Because of this, she decided to take him in, leading Seville to where she believed he belonged, the renowned magic academy of the Kingdom of Wenias, a place that trained elite sorcerers and witches. Before long, Seville had lived at the academy for 5 years. Strangely, during all that time, his only achievement was ranking first from the bottom, as he was completely unable to perform any magic. This result led to Seville being summoned to the principal's office for questioning. While on his way there, he encountered a chaotic scene. Outside the office, a tiny blonde girl with a stubborn attitude was shouting loudly, repeatedly calling the principal's name and demanding to see her. Since no one was paying attention to her, and Seville wouldn't let her in despite her causing a commotion, the girl brazenly grabbed Seville, using him as a hostage to threaten others. She shouted that if the principal didn't open the door, she couldn't guarantee Seville's safety. Just as the situation became tense, a wolf man named Humdum suddenly appeared. He quickly disarmed the blonde girl, causing her precious moon staff to fly into the air and fall to the ground, returning to its original form. Seeing this, the kind-hearted Seville bent down to pick it up, but that action nearly got him into serious trouble. Fortunately, the blonde girl and the beast man intervened just in time, otherwise Seville might have lost his life. The girl immediately burst into tears because her staff had been knocked away like a ball. At that moment, the principal's office door swung open. Principal Albus appeared, complaining about why it was so noisy outside. When she saw the blonde girl Rue, she immediately frowned because it seemed that whenever this girl appeared, she brought trouble with her. Then, the principal turned to Seville, announcing that he would have to participate in a special training program. She explained that if Cud stayed at the academy forever, Seville would never improve, so changing his environment was the only opportunity. The principal recounted the kingdom's background, explaining that Wenias had previously been immersed in fierce battles between witches and the church, only achieving peace for a mere 5 years. The northern part of the continent, including Wenias, had begun to accept the existence of witches and magic, while in the south, people still viewed them as strange and frightening. The underlying cause of this change was the uprising 10 years ago, led by the evil sorcerer known as Number 13. He had spread magic throughout Wenias, gathering witches and sorcerers to rise up against oppression, thereby liberating them from being hunted. However, his methods were extremely cruel, causing countless innocent lives to be sacrificed. Principal Albus herself had personally put an end to him. Nevertheless, Number 13 left a profound influence, somewhat changing people's perceptions of magic. From that story, the principal established a witch village in the south, so those with abilities would no longer be seen as outcasts. This time, Seville would be sent there along with other students to improve the image of witches in the eyes of the public. The principal made it clear that if, in the next 5 years, the village authorities still did not recognize them, Seville would be brought back, and all his memories of the academy and magic would be sealed. Hearing this, Rue exclaimed in admiration of the principal's plan, even volunteering to be the teacher guiding the group of students. Although the principal had already arranged someone else, Rue refused to back down, pulling out a letter of appointment that left the principal half helpless, half accepting. She promised to supervise the children, but set a condition that she wanted to borrow the empty book, which was the first magic book. The principal firmly refused because it was forbidden material, containing power that could destroy the entire world. However, she also suggested that Rue could go to the village to meet the author of the book, the Black Mud Witch. Rue happily agreed immediately. The next day, Seville, Rue, and several others gathered at the city gate to prepare for their journey. The group included the extroverted witch Senior Holt, and the lizard beast Cud, a young man who had traveled to many places and was confident he didn't need anyone's guidance. They stopped at a restaurant to fill their stomachs. There, Rue introduced the Luden staff, a strange weapon that could drain the magic from anyone who touched it, with only she, who had signed a contract, being immune. Among them, Seville was the only one who got carriage sick, forcing the whole group to walk. On the way, they conversed more openly. Seville revealed that he had completely lost his memory before entering the academy, and this internship was his only chance to prove himself. If he failed, his memories of the academy would also be completely erased, leaving behind an empty person. Rue showed disappointment when she heard him confess that he was almost unable to use magic. Every time he tried, he couldn't control it. But when he suppressed it, he couldn't activate anything. The Dawn Witch, Rue's nickname, advised Seville to give up being a sorcerer, as the problem was more serious than he thought. Due to having to walk, their plan was delayed. The next morning, the group arrived at an inn. While eating breakfast, they encountered two other students, people who had previously traveled with the Lizard Man. These two complained that they had been attacked by a gang of robbers the night before, and during the dangerous moment, the lizard had fled with the map and luggage. Rue immediately became suspicious, arguing that if he had really run away out of fear, he wouldn't have taken the belongings, as doing so would only weigh him down. Moreover, looking at these two healthy and clear-headed students, if the robbers wanted to sell them as slaves, they would certainly fetch a better price. Yet they targeted the Lizard Man, indicating this was not an ordinary gang of robbers, but witch hunters. Rue deduced that the Lizard Man had realized this, so he intentionally took the map to lure them away, sacrificing himself so his friends could retreat. Feeling responsible for letting a team member separate from the group, Rue decided to go rescue him herself. She strictly forbade Seville and Holt from following, believing that young, inexperienced sorcerers would only get in the way. But as usual, the more she forbade, the more they wanted to do the opposite. Holt came up with an idea to use divination magic on the handkerchief Rue had given Seville when he was carriage sick, in order to find Rue's location. The two of them ventured deep into the forest, with Holt constantly grumbling and cursing her cowardly friend who had abandoned them and refused to help rescue the Lizard Man. In their eyes, it wasn't their responsibility, so if he died, it wouldn't concern them. Suddenly, right in the middle of a pool of blood was Cud's severed lizard tail. The faces of both immediately turned pale, fear erupting as they thought about the possibility that the Lizard Man had been cut into pieces by the enemy. However, Holt quickly remembered that self-detaching the tail was a familiar survival method for this species, and the tail would grow back later. Realizing this, the two breathed a sigh of relief, while carefully picking up the tail to bring along, in case they needed it in an emergency. They followed the traces and quickly discovered footprints imprinted on the ground. Two sets were clearly from Cud and Rue, while the rest belonged to the attackers. So this time, there was only one opponent. Yet it had caused an experienced sorcerer like Cud to abandon his belongings and flee for his life. Holt shuddered, trembling as she remembered what she had learned about the Judges of Diognes, a group of warriors assembled from death row inmates selected by the church, specializing in hunting witches by any means necessary. Although this organization had been disbanded long ago, Holt still feared that those cold-blooded hunters had never disappeared from the world. Holt's fear was not without reason. In the past, when she was young, she had witnessed a lone hunter charging into the town she was visiting, massacring innocent people and burning everything. He had threatened her that if she were a witch, she would suffer the same fate. Terrified, Holt had run away, abandoning her friend who was tied to a stake, an obsession that haunted her ever after. For this reason, she hesitated, wanting to turn back and retreat. But at that moment, Cud's desperate cry echoed from deep within the forest. Seville immediately took Holt's hand, resolutely saying that if they continued going in, it could be a death sentence, but he couldn't stand by and watch friends being abandoned. That encouragement rekindled the flame of courage in Holt, dispelling the ghost of the past, forcing her to change her decision. Cud was now hiding on a high tree branch, while the hunters were searching rigorously, setting traps everywhere. Suddenly, he detected a wire stretched across the branch. When he realized it was a trap, it was too late. The branch snapped, causing him to fall. From the bushes, an arrow shot out. Cud dodged it, but fell into sharp stakes on the ground, which pierced through his leg. Limping away from the trap, Cud cautiously shielded himself, thinking more arrows would come. But this time, what appeared was a notorious judge, the one who had been chasing him all night. Cud struggled to fight back, but then was horrified to realize that magic had no effect on him. Throughout the night, he had only been able to deceive with light beams, then flee in desperation. This time, the judge quickly closed in, swinging a giant mace that sent Cud flying into a tree trunk, causing him to cough up blood. He looked down at the wound on Cud's leg that had already healed, and laughed like a madman. He had finally found a profitable catch, so his eyes were full of greed. If he could capture Cud alive, a lizard beast with extraordinary regenerative abilities, to sell to the researchers in the church, the value would be unimaginable. He called his underlings to bring a cage. In desperation, dark memories flooded back. Cud remembered being captured as a slave, imprisoned in a circus, tortured daily to display his regenerative abilities before a frenzied audience. That obsession remained deeply etched until he escaped, found his way to the academy, and became a powerful sorcerer. Yet now, he was being forced into a cage once more. Cud gritted his teeth, digging his claws into the tree roots to hold onto his last bit of freedom. The judge became angry and shattered his hand. Extreme pain caused Cud to scream, but he still bit tightly onto the tree root, waiting for his final moment. Just then, a thunderous explosion tore through the space. The tree next to the judge was split in half by powerful magic. The person who had just appeared was Rue, the 100-year-old Dawn Witch. Her Luden's staff roared fiercely, rushing in to attack. The judge only managed to smash the mouth of the staff, then broke out in a cold sweat when he realized the weapon in Rue's hand was the legendary Luden's. Rue proudly declared her identity. The judge momentarily faltered but still recklessly charged forward, chopping down the tree Rue was standing on. In response, Rue and Luden's swept through, causing the surrounding forest to fall flat, killing all the mad dogs under the judge's command in an instant. It seemed to be the end, but suddenly the pitiful cries of two students rang out. The two had been taken hostage by the judge. Holt immediately recognized him as the one who had spread terror in the town years ago. Her whole body trembled, frozen in place. Rue became angry, threatening that if he dared to harm her students, the staff would crush him. The judge sneered, demanding a change in conditions. Rue had to throw down Luden's and let him take Seville hostage instead. Faced with the sight of her students being strangled, Rue was in pain but had to comply, throwing down the staff. The judge immediately covered Luden's with a magic-resistant cloak, then ordered Seville to pick it up and bring it to him. Seville obediently complied, but surprisingly, the judge called Holt's name directly. Fear paralyzed Holt as he revealed the secret that she was a spy planted in the academy by the church. The cruel truth came rushing back. Holt remembered her origin. She was born with horns on her head, considered a monster, sent to the church by her own mother, a devout believer. There, they cut off her horns and placed her in an orphanage, then forced her to become a spy infiltrating the Magic Academy. However, the time at the academy had changed Holt. For the first time, she experienced friendship, teamwork, and the aspiration to become a genuine sorcerer. That's why, when she was allowed to participate in this internship, Holt was truly happy. But the church sent the brutal judge, pushing her into an inescapable tragedy. Holt collapsed, blaming herself for being the cause that dragged everyone into danger. But Seville just smiled, comforting her that it wasn't her fault. Moved by his kindness, Holt decided to live authentically for once. She used Cud's severed tail as a sacrifice, summoning a blue flame that erupted into a dragon, charging straight at the judge. He panicked and immediately pulled the magic-resistant cloak from Seville's hand to shield himself. The cloak blocked the attack, and he coldly advanced toward Holt, preparing to punish her betrayal. But at that moment, Seville heard Luden's calling. He was compelled to pick up the staff, despite Rue's screams to stop him. As soon as he touched it, the staff immediately glowed, drawing the enormous magic from within Seville, releasing a terrifying power. Even if he wanted to stop, it was too late. The staff had enveloped the entire area in a massive sphere of light. When the light faded, Seville regained consciousness to find Holt shielding him. She burst into tears, hugging him tightly, overjoyed that he was still alive. Rue, however, was furious to the point of turning pale. A bunch of inexperienced students daring to touch Luden's was like seeking death. They continued their journey. On the way, Seville wondered why he had touched Luden's and still survived. Rue revealed the shocking truth that the magic in his body was almost limitless, far exceeding that of ordinary sorcerers. That's why Luden's couldn't completely consume him. This was also the reason why Seville had been unable to control magic all this time. Before leaving, Rue warned Cud that it would be best to go with the group, but he still arrogantly refused. Only when she climbed onto his shoulders and grumbled did he reluctantly accept. Ironically, when they decided to go back to the forest to find the severed tail, they discovered that it had already been used by Holt as a sacrifice for the dragon flame. Cud was stunned, his heart ached, and tears streamed down his face. As night fell and the space gradually became quiet, Seville and Holt sat together by a deserted stream to share their youthful feelings. Meanwhile, in the distance, the lizard man and the lowly old woman Rue had found a small inn to rest after their long journey. In that peaceful atmosphere, Holt decided to remove the hat that had always hidden her biggest secret. When her hair fell down, the pair of horns was revealed under the moonlight. and she summoned all her courage to tell Seville the story of her past. Because of these horns, throughout her childhood, she had been ostracized, despised, and driven away by the harsh gazes of others. However, thanks to what she learned at the academy, along with Rua's confirmation, Holt had come to understand her true identity. She was a fallen beast, a creature formed when a witch grants power to a beast warrior. When both the witch and the beast warrior die, the beast's soul remains in the witch's bloodline, and then their descendants give birth to fallen beasts like her. After unburdening her heart, Holt emotionally placed a light kiss on Seville's cheek, as a thank you for trusting and accepting her. Right after that, she hurriedly ran away, leaving Seville with a face that hadn't yet recovered its composure. As soon as Holt left, the lowly witch suddenly appeared right beside him, scolding Seville for being young and inexperienced, criticizing him for not knowing how to take advantage of the opportunity when someone had given such a clear green light. The next morning, terrible news arrived. 2 fellow students from their group had been arrested for leaking information to the church. To put it bluntly, they were spies. From then on, only 4 people continued on the journey toward the witch village. Before departing, the lowly old woman instructed Cud to heal his arm, because a warrior with injuries couldn't accomplish anything. She even sarcastically remarked that an arm wasn't a jackfruit leaf that could grow back whenever it wanted. Rue consoled him, saying that there was a charging station here, so there was no worry about lacking magic. During their discussion, the lowly old woman suggested that the most effective way to transfer magic was through a kiss on the lips, but she was immediately dismissed by Holt, who considered it an improper idea. Finally, they agreed that skin-to-skin contact, such as holding hands, was sufficient to conduct magic. However, if things got out of control, Cud might absorb too much energy, leading to an explosion and death. To prevent danger, the lowly old woman decided to act as the supervisor. She held the hands of both young men, transferring the magical flow from Seville to Cud. In just a moment, thanks to the healing spell, Cud's arm and lost tail quickly grew back. The surrounding people who witnessed this scene were all amazed. Rue was excited, calling everyone to sing and dance together to celebrate the power of sorcery. Leaving that place, they arrived at a large town. An inconsiderate horse carriage rushed past, splashing mud all over Seville, making him look utterly miserable. To comfort her student, Rue led the group to a familiar guest house. There was a spacious communal bath, perfect for relaxation. When Seville and Cud soaked in the warm water, Cud shared the real reason why he aspired to become a sorcerer. He recounted that in the past, he had been treated like a circus animal, brought out for entertainment. Just then, a terrible disaster erupted in the north. A crazed witch plotted to destroy the world. Somehow, Cud was fortunate to survive and was rescued by the dragon-breaking king. At that time, fallen beasts were considered symbols of filth, hybrid creatures despised by society. Yet, while everyone looked down on him, only that hero smiled with relief upon learning that Cud was alive. From that moment, he cherished the dream of joining the church's magic corps, becoming someone strong and noble like his savior. The next stage of their journey proceeded surprisingly smoothly. Wherever they went, the group was recognized, and people warmly welcomed Rue. Rue, with her experience, always knew where to fish, where to rest appropriately. She taught the youngsters survival skills in nature, as well as how to use magic to help others, things the Academy had never taught. Thanks to the magic of Ludens, Rue had existed for 300 years. Her body operated on magic, needing neither food nor sleep, and being immortal, she had no need for love or childbearing. That long life had become boring, so anything interesting, especially dramatic events related to the survival of the world, she gave top priority. Suddenly, a boy ran up in a panic, frantically reporting that this place wasn't safe. He pulled Rua's hand, leading the whole group to a tree hollow, then erected a perfect concealment barrier. Unfortunately, the barrier could only hide their appearance, but couldn't eliminate sound. Right after, a white tiger fallen beast appeared, relentlessly pursuing. Having lost track of the boy, he threatened loudly, saying if the boy didn't come out, he would dislocate all the joints in his body. Thanks to the sound of rapid heartbeats, he quickly discovered those hiding in the tree hollow, then swung his sword to break the barrier. The boy tumbled out, and Seville's group could no longer hide. The Tiger Guard warned them not to be foolish enough to use magic, as his speed was certainly faster than any spell. In the dangerous situation, Rue chose to stay behind as a distraction, while ordering the youngsters to quickly leave. Rue confronted the enemy, confidently provoking him. The tiger understood clearly that turning his back on Rue at this point would be suicidal. From his way of speaking, Rue noticed he knew quite a bit of information about the Luden's magic staff, about the internship, and the witch village. Finally, he decided to retreat, understanding that he couldn't win. Nevertheless, he still warned Rue that if she continued leading the children to the village, they would face disaster. At the same time, the remaining people had brought the boy safely to the village church. Outside the door, a blindfolded parish priest was waiting. The boy Leos ran into his arms, excitedly boasting that these people had saved him. The priest not only knew about the incident, but also quickly recognized that they were all witches. Not just the priest, but it seemed the entire village had already known about the internship group's arrival. When asked about the humanoid beast that had attacked at the forest edge, he calmly stated that it was the guard that the witch used to control this village. With a weary tone, the priest said that their presence wouldn't bring any change, then bluntly asked the group to leave. He reminded them that 2 years ago, the supervisor from the academy had abandoned the village to invaders and disappeared without a trace. Since that day, that witch had comfortably taken control, and the villagers no longer had the ability to resist. Hearing this, Seville suddenly realized that their internship group consisted entirely of those who were looked down upon at the academy. A spy, a rebellious fallen beast, and himself, who was at the bottom of the class. Nominally, they were sent for an internship, but in reality, they were being cleverly expelled with the excuse of not completing the internship. Cud wondered why the villagers didn't seek help from the church's magic corps, but the priest just laughed coldly, asserting that the Night Corps would never save a witch village. Just as the group was confused, Rue appeared suddenly like a ghost. She scolded the students for being so gullible. While there was no evidence showing that the priest wasn't an accomplice of the tiger in the forest, when the priest asked why, if she suspected him, she didn't kill him from the start. Rue just calmly replied that she preferred observing how people found all sorts of reasons to justify their lies. Finally, to avoid arguing further, she asked the priest to take the group on a tour of the village, wanting to see the reactions of the locals herself before deciding whether to trust him or not. The priest reluctantly agreed, so the group was brought back to the internship village, where Leos's father was anxiously waiting for his son to return safely. As soon as he saw his father, the little boy ran into his arms, and the father repeatedly thanked the group. Afterward, he led them around the village, telling stories as they walked. He said that the previous supervising witch was actually a good person, which made Cud unable to hold back his question. If she was truly good, why did she abandon the village to invaders? Even the father admitted he didn't understand the reason. The villagers now all hid in their homes, obeying the witch by avoiding strangers. After walking for a while, they stopped in front of a dilapidated, crooked house. Hanging in front of it were 4 straw figures with the appearance of being executed, swinging in the wind, a scene so eerie it chilled one to the bone. The father explained that this was the punishment the witch imposed on a few who had daringly tried to escape and were caught, brutally killed, and then their straw effigies hung up to warn anyone else who might think of leaving the village. She was indeed cruel, but as long as the villagers obediently followed her orders, they could live in peace. Upon returning to their temporary home, Rue angrily decided to deal with the witch, and conveniently resolve the issue with the scheming principal as well. Holt proposed returning to the royal capital to seek help, believing the Magic Corps would listen. But Seville immediately objected, arguing that they couldn't turn the village into a bloody battlefield just for the sake of graduation, and that they needed to solve the problem before them themselves. The lizard man lost patience, believing they had no chance of winning. A witch who could command a warrior as strong as the tiger brother just confronting her would be suicide. Better to end it themselves. Seville gritted his teeth in rebuttal, saying he couldn't accept that, because once he held the staff in his hands, he no longer feared death. But Holt was still trembling with fear, unwilling to admit it. Seville looked at her, softly saying that if she didn't want to, Holt and the lizard man could go back, while he and the teacher would fight to the end. Hearing that, Holt's eyes filled with tears as she cried out in desperation. She said that what she feared wasn't death, but the haunting thought of losing him forever. Those words stunned Seville, who couldn't understand the situation that made Holt burst into tears and run away. Seville was about to chase after her to apologize, but was held back by the teacher, who said that apologizing when you don't understand what you did wrong would only hurt the girl more. Even the lizard man sighed, realizing that Holt was suffering because she considered Seville a true friend, and she didn't want to lose another friend. Finally, Seville came to his senses and hurriedly ran to find Holt. Meanwhile, Holt had gone to the church, where she met a girl who was sweeping, completely covered up. Seeing Holt crying, the girl gently comforted her. But before she could say anything more, the priest suddenly appeared, ordering the girl to leave in a harsh tone. Holt was surprised that he knew about her argument with her friends. She honestly admitted it, and was about to go back to apologize to the group. But her eyes suddenly stopped on the priest's staff, which clearly bore the emblem of the De Dignis Judges Association. In an instant, Holt realized he was from the church. Unfortunately, it was too late, as steel threads tightly bound her body. The priest coldly transformed, drawing a razor-sharp scythe from his staff and placing it against Holt's neck, preventing her from calling for help. He coldly threatened that if she still wanted to live, she should continue being a spy. At the same time, Seville returned empty-handed, unable to find any trace of Holt. His heart filled with worry. Rue decided to use a tracking spell, and the traces led them to a gloomy cave in the forest. Looking down at the ground, the group shuddered when they saw pools of blood. Rue frowned, clearly sensing that there were many enemies inside. Cut immediately demanded retreat, certain it was a trap, but Rue boldly declared that having been invited, guests must attend. Rue swung Ludens to shatter the trap in a moment, but couldn't restrain the panicking Cud. Rue tried hard to encourage him to remember his dream of graduating from the academy, joining the Magic Corps, and becoming a legend like the Dragon-Breaking King. However, Cud chose the cowardly escape, turning his back and running away. Just as he left the cave, he came face to face with the White Tiger boss. The tiger sneered, enticing him to join his side, then added the cruel words that he had eaten Holt, whose flavor was as delicious as her beautiful appearance. Hearing this, Cud immediately flew into a rage, his entire body turning blue and red as he charged into a death battle. Meanwhile, in the cave, Seville accidentally emanated magical light, even summoning light that dazzled Rue. She was angry, but then acknowledged that any witch would dream of having an intern with an unlimited source of magic like him. Those words suddenly plunged Seville into dark memories, causing him to collapse in pain. Rue advised him to withdraw, but Seville was determined that as long as he could save Holt, he wasn't afraid of anything. Just then, a giant tentacle extended from a door inside the cave, wrapped tightly around Seville, and dragged him away. Rue rushed to save him, but the Luden staff was also pulled away by steel threads. The priest revealed himself, kicking Rue into a dark room, coldly saying that she should have killed him from the beginning. The door closed, and then in the blue light, Seville noticed another girl standing there, radiating a bright aura amidst the thick darkness. When witnessing the appearance of the strange woman, Seville immediately recognized that she was the one who had rescued him from his undefined and dark life before. The sister extended her hand, her eyes filled with anticipation, then said that she had been waiting for him for a very long time. Before Seville could wonder or ask questions, Rue quickly intervened, hurriedly preventing him because she feared that with just one glance, the woman could manipulate and control him. Clearly, that sister had no goodwill toward Rue either. With a snap of her fingers, Rue was instantly thrown back, collapsing unconscious on the ground. The woman expressed her disappointment at seeing Seville once again surrounded by those she considered ignorant and failures, people who were only fixated on the potential magic within him. She threw down a blood-stained hat, saying it belonged to Holt, causing Seville to panic and cry out. Asking what she had done to his friend, she calmly replied that she had let a mercenary eat the girl. That answer was like an explosion directly into Seville's mind, making him dizzy, his heart racing. Not stopping there, the sister continued to reveal that she had gone to great lengths, from controlling the village to arranging every incident, all for the sole purpose of reclaiming Seville from the principal. Hearing this, Seville suddenly realized that all the injuries and losses that so many people had endured were directly related to his own existence. A series of fragmented, painful memories suddenly flooded back, causing him to collapse on the spot. The sister, who called herself a witch, did not give up, continuing to entice him, trying to draw Seville to her side to go together to a world she deemed more suitable. But Seville firmly shook his head. He said that the simple, happy days beside his friends were the most precious thing in life, because they had never considered him a failure or worthless. What was suitable, what was not, he would decide for himself, and certainly among the things he needed, she did not exist. In an instant, Seville intended to release all his magic, concentrating it into one decisive strike to both rescue Rue and stop that dangerous woman. But before he could finish his incantation, Rue suddenly awoke and unexpectedly hugged him tightly, giving Seville a long kiss. When she let go, Rue smiled and said that his body was now filled with magic. Rue immediately recited the familiar spell that Seville had used to punish the judge in the forest earlier. From the overflowing stream of magic, a gigantic 5-colored dragon appeared, bearing a majestic appearance, and charged straight at the sister. But it all became meaningless. She merely waved her hand, and all the magic was dispelled in the blink of an eye. Amidst the dissipating smoke, the sister laughed arrogantly, boasting that she was the creator of that magic. So using it against her was nothing short of foolish. She introduced herself as the Black Mud Witch Zero, the one who had compiled the empty book, the mysterious book containing all magical knowledge. Hearing this, Seville understood that in this life, the bond between them as teacher and student had ended. Zero stepped closer to Seville. But surprisingly, instead of launching a fatal attack, Zero made the entire room explode in a brilliant paper fireworks display. She playfully teased Seville and announced that from now on, she would officially become his supervisor during the internship. Seville was still dazed, not knowing how to react, to the point that everyone was stunned by Zero's sudden appearance and overwhelming presence. Rue had to explain that this was just a test, and Seville had successfully passed this difficult challenge. At the same time, Holt also managed to arrive, making Seville breathe a sigh of relief when he saw that his busty friend was still alive. She ran to hug him tightly, and everything gradually became clear. All the villagers had originally participated in a plan to test them. Every detail, every challenge, everything had been elaborately arranged. The priest, who had threatened Holt, was actually just a factor in the play. When he forced her to continue pretending to be a spy, she straightforwardly spat in his face. Just that small action was enough for her to pass her part of the test. He became angry, struck her once, then returned her staff, while asking Rue if she had realized this was just a test from the beginning. Rue calmly nodded, saying that a clean house, fully furnished, could not possibly have been abandoned for 2 whole years. That had already been clear evidence. Right after, Cud and the Tiger Boss also entered. It turned out they too had passed their own challenges, making the Lizard Man overjoyed, tearfully embracing his friends. The entire group was safe, having survived the brutal test. The villagers held a big celebration party, congratulating the young sorcerers and witches who had passed the test. During the wine party, Zero once again spoke up to congratulate the students. Holt curiously asked why they had been chosen. Zero explained that because they were all exceptionally outstanding students, far surpassing ordinary people, their character needed to be thoroughly tested. Because if such talented people chose the path of darkness, they would certainly become a terrible disaster for humanity. Zero evaluated Holt as someone who could surpass even the Crescent Bay Witch, the current principal, within 2 decades. As for Cud, she believed that if he developed and honed his recovery ability, then sooner or later he would become an immortal sorcerer. And for Seville, Zero confessed that he was the only one whose potential limits she could not see through. With an infinite source of magic, Seville could completely live for centuries, enough time to refine and reach a power that could pierce through anything. Of course, the prerequisite was still diligent training. Finally, Zero moved on to the official announcement about the internship plan. Each person in the group would have their name on a shop in the village and receive commissions from the people. Just as she was about to speak more seriously, the Tiger Brother and the priest interrupted, enticing the young ones with a tray of appetizing food. After the party, the group returned to their shared home. That night, they unexpectedly saw a man riding a dragon flying across the moonlight. The Lizard Man almost went crazy as he immediately recognized his idol, the Dragon-Breaking King, who had appeared. The group hurriedly chased after the dragon's shadow. When it landed, the Dragon-Breaking King approached and handed them a letter from the academy. The content of the letter stunned everyone. The principal officially granted the students the right to use magic without limitation, like those who had graduated. This meant they were qualified to participate in real battles. Returning, the group told Holt. Hearing the news, she deeply regretted missing the opportunity to see a dragon up close. She loudly complained, saying next time she definitely wouldn't be in the village anymore. The group heard this and their faces saddened. Rue comforted them, saying that at least she would stay for a long time to read through Zero's library, so it would be much later before she left. Hearing this, the young ones became happy again. Only when the night was over, with just Dawn and Zero left, did the conversation shift to a different tone. Zero confessed that she was in a state of severe magical depletion, and perhaps the reason she drew Seville close was because of the infinite source of magic within him. Afterward, Zero recounted to Dawn the painful past of Seville. He had witnessed his mother being killed right before his eyes by a witch, had his magic stolen, and even the thief died in agony from absorbing too much. Those haunting memories caused Seville to seal a part of his mind, living in uncertainty throughout his childhood. That's why when Zero found him, she brought him to the academy so he would have a chance to start anew. However, they also realized that if one day Seville accidentally activated all his uncontrollable magic, he could self-destruct. Therefore, bringing him to this place was also for the purpose of observation. Dawn immediately questioned, asking by what right Zero controlled Seville's life. In response, Zero calmly revealed a shocking secret. Seville was her nephew, the son of the infamous Witch Number 13, who had stolen the empty book and used it to spread war. Time flew by, and more than 2 months had passed since the day the internship at the village began. That period wasn't too long, but it was enough for them to gradually stabilize their new lives. Each of them, through their own efforts and abilities, had found a small place in the village. After many days of learning and experiencing reality, Holt had now become a versatile sorceress, able to meet most of the villagers' needs, from everyday trivial matters to more serious requests about magic. The villagers gradually became familiar with her face, and whenever they needed help, they sought her with trust. Cud, with his expertise in healing, didn't need much time to establish his position. He was taken in by a local clinic as an assistant, becoming the effective arm of the doctors here. Each passing day, Cud witnessed the pain of patients and then saw them recover gradually thanks to his healing magic, which brought him a quiet but profound pride. Meanwhile, Seville chose to open a shop right in his own home, providing magic for those who needed it. His most regular customers were none other than his 2 companions. Each time he transmitted magic was like floating on cloud 9, like taking drugs. After his 2 friends went to work, Seville began to get used to being the home front, gradually accepting the rhythm of staying at home. He took on household chores, taking care of the house, while also acting as the group's charger whenever they returned from missions. For him, that was also a way to contribute, to feel that he wasn't useless. However, when the Dawn Witch came to visit, she wasn't very pleased with the enclosed, completely introverted lifestyle of the young man. She lovingly scolded that Seville would soon become stagnant this way, wasting his youth. Seville smiled, saying he felt fine, because people still needed someone to handle magic, and if he didn't do the housework, no one would lift a finger. Inside, Seville still thought it was a responsibility, a way for himself not to fall into emptiness, something he had feared when recalling Zero's words. Seeing this, Rue felt touched. Remembering Seville's past, she couldn't help but feel compassion for the young boy. She pulled up a chair, drew him close, and held him in her arms, her voice gentler than usual. In her eyes, Seville was no different from a fledgling bird still needing wings to fly far, not staying forever in a cage. Therefore, she decided to find a way to drive the young one out of the house to give him an opportunity to step outside. She instructed Seville to do a simple task: go pick some tea leaves for her. On the way, Seville happened to meet Leos. Hearing him say he wanted to find tea leaves, the little boy excitedly offered to lead the way, as he knew exactly where the best tea leaves were. So the 2 of them ventured deep into the forest. From afar, Seville saw this and looked worried. The deep forest was not a safe place for a little boy without protection. But before his warnings could reach them, Leos had already pouted, run away, and climbed up a tree to hide. Seville called out repeatedly, telling him to come down, but Leos only mumbled a confession that he had been trying to act cocky, pretending to know everything, only to get them both lost. Seville sighed softly, then gently led the little boy to find a way back. While fumbling around, Leos suddenly discovered a mouse nibbling on Seville's pant leg. It was Lily's familiar pet. The little boy was delighted, saying the animal would surely lead the way for them. So they hurried after it, and indeed, not long after, both returned safely to the church. There, the first scene was Leos's mother waiting. She flew into a rage, scolding her son, then pulled his ear and dragged him straight inside. Behind Seville, a tall figure appeared. The priest, with a cold face but fiery energy. He invited Seville into the church for tea and cakes. Inside, Lily was also present. Immediately, the priest asked the girl to remove her hat to speak properly, but Lily adamantly refused, afraid of frightening the guests. He didn't listen and abruptly yanked off her hat. The mouse ears were clearly visible, making Lily extremely embarrassed, wishing she could find a hole to crawl into. The priest, however, remained calm, telling her not to make a fuss and to quickly prepare food. When the food was served, the priest turned to scold Seville thoroughly for daring to venture into the dangerous deep forest just to find tea leaves when there were plenty around Zero's house. However, he also encouraged him, saying that going to many places, learning many experiences would help him mature, rather than always hiding at home. Leaving the church, Seville met Holt on the road. She was surprised to see him willing to step outside, and gently wiped away the food stains still on the corners of his mouth. But Seville's eyes immediately noticed the blood stain on her sleeve. Holt hurriedly explained that it wasn't her blood, but that of a mercenary when she and the tiger brother went into the forest to kill wild wolves. In reality, during that battle, Holt had been so frightened that she couldn't recite her spells in time. A mercenary had to stand up to protect her and was injured. A sense of helplessness overwhelmed her, making Holt burst into tears. Lily, passing by, saw this and came to comfort her and led her away. Rue, who had been secretly following all along, stepped out, called Seville back, and said someone needed his magic. They immediately went to Zero, who was busy stopping the bleeding for the white tiger brother. Without thinking, as soon as she saw her nephew, Zero rushed over to kiss the young boy to replenish her magic, then used advanced healing magic on the tiger brother. The result was miraculous. The tiger brother's body recovered almost instantly, his entire body feeling relieved. But the first words he uttered weren't of gratitude, but of jealousy. He was uncomfortable seeing Zero so close to the young boy. Meanwhile, Seville was anxiously worried whether Holt's accident would cause her to be evaluated negatively, but both Zero and the tiger brother assured him that this matter hadn't reached the point of expulsion. The tiger brother only solemnly instructed that next time they must cooperate better. Seville suddenly remembered Leos and hurriedly went to find the little boy, to give him another opportunity to go into the forest with him. Zero now clearly understood that Rue had deliberately set up a scheme, ordering her nephew to do errands to lure Seville out of the house. Rue complained that she didn't like the young boy Seville closing himself off, locking himself within 4 walls. But Zero and the tiger brother found it normal. Being able to do what one wants is sometimes a kind of happiness. When only the 2 of them were left, Rue seriously asked why Zero only took a little magic from Seville, while she clearly needed more than that. Zero replied that as his family and also his supervisor, she couldn't demand too much, as doing so would be exploiting the boy. Rue snapped, saying that if it continued like this, Zero would gradually grow old and then die. But Zero just smiled, letting out a soft sigh. For her, living as a real person, experiencing old age, and then one day dying beside the person she loved was true happiness. Meanwhile, Kud also encountered troubles in his work. He went to a neighboring village to treat people suffering from an epidemic. Being too eager and excited, he exhausted all his energy to heal all the patients at once, resulting in complete exhaustion and fainting on the spot. The head doctor had to carry him back. When he woke up in the familiar room, Kud hadn't yet regained his senses before wondering who the next patient was. He went downstairs and heard his friends recounting the whole incident, making him both embarrassed and regretful. Nevertheless, he quickly realized that Holt had caused even bigger problems than him, so the 2 of them argued loudly. Fortunately, Rue appeared just in time, sternly reminding them that if they truly wanted to avoid recurring troubles, they needed to work diligently and more responsibly. Finally, she also announced that the next day the whole group would have to meet with Zero. The following day, they all went to Zero's house and were immediately overwhelmed by the gigantic book collection. Zero explained that the books displayed in the room were just ordinary ones, while all the forbidden books were hidden in a secret library in the north. Hearing this, everyone couldn't hide their excitement and discussed visiting there. However, Seville immediately objected. After the recent war, the north was still full of chaotic ruins and rampaging monsters, clearly not suitable for a leisurely trip. That place was so dangerous that just a surprise attack would be enough to take a life. Therefore, he decided to cancel his friend's plan entirely. Nevertheless, Holt maintained her confidence, believing that with infinite magic, along with the group's coordinated attack and recovery abilities, they would become invincible. In contrast, Kud didn't have much faith. In his eyes, a sorcerer who had accidentally attacked her own teammate and someone who easily exhausted himself to the point of fainting while saving others could hardly be reliable support. Just as that tense atmosphere spread, Zero suddenly became different. She spoke sternly, saying she had prepared a special lesson for Holt and emphasized that she wouldn't let Holt return until she mastered this new type of magic. Zero immediately pulled Holt along, while Seville happened to discover an interesting book on the shelf. The training session began, with Zero asking Holt to practice a dragon-shaped attack magic. Previously, Holt had performed quite well, so Zero seemed pleased. This time, she presented a new challenge, forcing Holt to use a single spell to light all the candles in the room. Holt immediately failed, trembling and bursting into tears as she realized she didn't have enough magic to maintain this too heavy spell. Zero demonstrated, using only an amount of magic equal to what Holt was required to use, but producing an effect several times more effective. She took that opportunity to explain more about how to control and use magic efficiently. However, before her lecture ended, Zero suddenly collapsed. The magic in her had been completely depleted, causing her student to panic and rush to help her. Seville tried to transfer energy to her, but all efforts were in vain. For a moment, he even thought about repeating what he had done before, but Zero shook her head, saying that this time it wouldn't work. Although she tried to stand up and claimed that just a hearty meal would restore her health, she immediately fell again. Seville hurriedly picked her up, his caring demeanor reminding Zero of her brother. Seville took her to her room, trying several times to transfer magic, but all attempts failed. Zero gently told him to stop, because if she really wanted to, draining his magic would be an easy task. However, Seville's eyes stopped at Zero's eyes identical to his brother's. He blurted out asking if she knew anything about his mother, but Zero replied that she knew nothing about his mother, though about his father, she knew better than anyone. Seville had never thought that he had a father, but before he could ask further, Zero directed him to the book he had brought from the library. When Seville expressed his intention to go into the forest to look for herbs and planned to use the book for research, Zero burst into laughter, saying it would be extremely difficult because the handwriting in it was both messy and hard to read. However, Seville found it completely normal, even understanding most of it because his own handwriting was no less terrible. His father was a rare genius, and the secrets in that book perhaps only he could decode. The tiger brother later hurriedly brought food. As soon as he met Seville, he immediately thanked him for promptly bringing Zero back. Otherwise, the situation might have been much worse. Seville felt guilty because he couldn't transfer magic to help her. But Zero immediately recognized this and decided to tell him something important. She asked directly whether he wanted to become a magic user specializing in providing magic, or if he wanted to step onto the path of a true sorcerer. If he only chose the first option, then this village had nothing left to help him improve further. Zero advised Seville to think carefully. Seville took the book into the forest with Leos. The two of them walked while studying, and he quickly realized that the book contained much valuable knowledge. After a while, they came across the carcass of a deer that had just been attacked by wolves. Before they could look away, a forest of bright red flowers appeared in front of them. Exactly the species they were looking for. Leos couldn't hide his joy, immediately running into the middle of the flower forest, while Seville instinctively felt uneasy. The bad premonition made his heart race, and indeed he was right. A strange creature emerged from the flower forest. Seville shouted for Leos to lie down, but it was too late. The monster compressed its power and then shot a barrage of spines like a rain of arrows. Seville was wounded in several places, but what terrified him most was that Leos had also been hit hard. The boy fell unconscious, his breathing weak. Seville tried to recite a healing spell, but like all previous times, he couldn't succeed. In desperation, he could only hold Leos and rush back to the village. The accumulating pain caused Seville's consciousness to fade. He blamed himself for neglecting his training, only knowing how to rely on others. In that desperation, a sound echoed in his head. It was Rui's voice, through Luden's magic raven that had found him. Ru ordered him not to collapse, to keep running, because Zero was on her way. If he hurried, Leos would still have a chance to survive. Seville gritted his teeth and stood up, using his remaining strength to run toward the village. Finally, he met Zero and the group of mercenaries. Seville burst into tears, repeatedly apologizing because he couldn't heal Leos. The tiger brother comforted him, saying he had tried his best. Ru also quickly arrived, resolutely demanding that Zero use her blood as a conductor to save the little boy. Without hesitation, Ru cut her wrist to let blood flow like a stream, and Zero immediately applied high-level healing magic. Thanks to that, Leos escaped the scythe of death. They took each other to the clinic. Cut hurriedly healed them, but he was also exhausted. Seville described the shape of the monster, causing Ru to immediately recognize it as a type of beast created by demons. This species usually disguised itself as animal carcasses to lure prey, then used spines to suck blood, and later evolved into a new form. People called them flower syringes. Normally, they only appeared in the north, but this time they were seen in the south. Clearly someone was deliberately spreading danger. Zero immediately sent Cud and the Tiger Brother to investigate. But as soon as they opened the door, they saw Hold'em already blocking the way, saying he had come to inspect the situation. They then went to the church to discuss with the priest. Rumors arose that someone was collecting remnants from the old disaster, selling them on the black market at high prices. Although there was no evidence, the appearance of monsters in the forest made this rumor even more suspicious. The priest decided to bring Lily along to investigate, while the Tiger Brother had to go to the neighboring village to warn them. But if both left, the village would have no one to protect it. In the end, the responsibility of protecting this place was assigned to Hold'em, even though he wasn't very willing. Meanwhile, Zero unexpectedly demanded to go with the Tiger Brother. He tried to persuade her to stay, as she had just depleted her magic, and going along now would only add to the burden. But the Tiger Brother still had to concede and let Zero accompany him. A moment later, the wolf appeared at the hospital and complained that he was only supposed to inspect, but was reluctantly given the additional task of protecting the village. After saying that, he chased the students away to stay alone with Rue. At that point, Rue straightforwardly asked him to be clear, because the timing of his appearance in the village and the discovery of monsters was an unbelievable coincidence. But if he intended to destroy the village, he would have done it from the beginning rather than beating around the bush. For the time being, Rue chose to trust him, while the wolf asked if she had any way to handle the remnants, as she was the only witch his master trusted. Those words recalled in Rue memories of a childhood friend who had sacrificed himself to protect everyone, making her believe that person would also want her to continue carrying the mission of protecting the village. Rue accepted the mission but didn't forget to demand payment. The wolf replied that he would ask the principal's permission for her to read the empty book, making Rue overjoyed. After the incident in the forest, Seville had made the decision to become a real sorcerer and was determined to train. He asked his two friends to teach him magic, and in return, he would restore magic for them. Both agreed, especially Holt, who clearly expressed her desire to be charged with magic through kisses. Seville still naively refused. Just then, the wolf passed by looking for an inn to rest, and Seville agreed to lead him there. The wolf tried to maintain his composure, because he feared that if he was caught going to an inn with a young girl, the village's population would soon increase. The other three girls sternly demanded to file a complaint with the principal, claiming he was a perverted guard. Meanwhile, an uncle appeared, asking to speak privately with Seville. This uncle knew that Seville wasn't the cause of his son's injury, and had even saved Leos, but he still didn't want Seville to get near his son anymore. After saying that, he left, leaving Seville alone. At that moment, he was suddenly attacked from behind, the attacker being none other than the brutal judge they had encountered in the forest. He strangled Seville, knocked him unconscious, then covered his head with a bag, threw him onto a horse carriage, and drove straight into the dark forest. In the darkness, Seville heard a woman's voice asking how long he intended to hide his true nature. Buried horrifying memories flooded back. He saw his mother hiding him in a closet and instructing him absolutely not to approach the witch with eyes identical to his, because she would take everything away. His mother locked the door, but a sudden explosion shook the entire house. A witch thirsting for power appeared, loudly demanding that he come out, or else his mother would die. Seville left the closet, but she broke her promise, directly killing his mother right before his eyes, causing the immature spirit of the boy to collapse. She grabbed Seville, intending to seize his magic. She thrust her hand through his chest to suck the magic flow, but as soon as she had absorbed enough, before she could push him away, Seville tightly grasped her hand, causing the amount of power to exceed the threshold and backfire. She struggled, but it was too late, her body melting like mud. Seville screamed, escaping the nightmare, but immediately received a slap from the judge for making noise. He informed him that this time the order was to capture him alive, so he couldn't torture him as he wished. Just then, calls rang out from afar as Cud and Holt galloped toward them on horseback. The two jumped down right in front of Seville, and seeing the judge there, they had to fight. Cud cut off his tail and handed it to Holt to use as a conductor for summoning. Holt successfully summoned a blue dragon with magic, without even needing to recite a spell. The dragon charged straight at the judge, catching him off guard, while the blue flames also cut the ropes without injuring Seville. The judge prepared to counterattack, but Seville had already closed in, threatening him to stand still or die immediately. Meanwhile, Rue was busy cleaning up monster remnants in the forest. She directed Ludens to act, while she leisurely watched. Ludens spread everywhere, collecting sharp fragments and swallowing them whole. When about to return, she encountered a man who had been stung by bees until his face was deformed, so she took him back to the village. On the way, she saw the wolf lying unconscious at the gate, woke him up, and asked why. He recalled that someone had reported Seville being kidnapped. The two students wanted to go to the rescue immediately, but when he tried to stop them, he was hit with a sleep spell and fell right on the road. He worried that the students were in danger, but the teacher had already anticipated everything, saying this was certainly the principal's plan to test the students' adaptability. The wolf had to admit it. However, he was concerned because the person used this time was the brutal judge. Back to the battle, the judge used his iron head to hit Seville, causing him to have a lump on his head, and delivered more heavy blows that made both his arms ache painfully, while the other two were also knocked down. Seeing this, he believed the mission had been successful because injuries of this level could still be healed. But surprisingly, his hammer-wielding hand was severed, and his body was tightly bound by threads that appeared from nowhere. He realized this was the technique of the blindfolded priest, who was supposed to have left the village. The priest emerged from the darkness, explaining that the mouse in the church had alerted him, so he had time to return. He extinguished all the oil lamps, and when the moonlight was obscured, he removed his eye bandage. The priest acted cruelly, cutting off both of the judge's legs, saying as he did so that they could still be restored with magic. Zero and the tiger brother immediately rushed over, fearing the priest would chop the enemy into pieces, but fortunately, he stopped in time. Rue and the wolf also appeared, witnessing the students being beaten badly. Zero angrily questioned the wolf, causing him to panic and hide behind the teacher. Zero threatened that either he told the truth, or he would face punishment. Finally, the wolf had to admit that the judge had been assigned the task of bringing a student back alive to escape the death sentence, while the real purpose was to test the village's ability to protect witches. Everyone collectively blamed the wolf for his incompetence, but Zero pointed out that the defensive loophole of the village was too obvious, which was why the judge could infiltrate so easily. The tiger brother and the priest assessed that the fighting force in the village was still too lacking, and once dispersed, it would expose even more weaknesses. They admitted that witches were being implicated, and if they couldn't protect them, their reputation would be destroyed forever. Meanwhile, the wolf came up with the idea for Zero to use the judge. The judge vehemently objected, claiming this was outside the agreement, but the wolf threatened that he had already broken his promise earlier, so if he wanted to live, he had to comply. Zero accepted the proposal. The next day, when announcing this to the students, there was an immediate fierce reaction. The girl insisted that the judge was untrustworthy and demanded his execution. Zero replied that if she truly wanted revenge, she could have it, but hatred would only create a vicious cycle. The judge had committed many sins, but now had an opportunity to atone by protecting the village. Nevertheless, the girl was still furious because he had killed too many people. The priest intervened, saying that when he still served the church, he too had killed countless people under orders, and Ruiz Ludens had also swallowed numerous lives. Under the pressure from everyone, she burst into tears but finally accepted, with the condition that the judge must live under the Tiger brothers' supervision, and she herself would have the right to command him during that time. The next day, before leaving the village, the wolf expressed his wish for Rue to accompany him to the Forbidden Library in the north, but she refused because she still had to supervise the students on this journey. The wolf reluctantly left. When Rue returned, she heard Seville and Holt talking. He said he had regained his memories, although they weren't very pleasant and still felt strange. Moreover, remembering didn't help much. With an infinitely negative Ek, he found it difficult to understand human emotions, especially love. Seville mentioned that someone had once said Holt seemed to like him, which made Holt blush. Seville then curiously asked what love felt like, and Holt replied that when you like someone, you want to become special to them. Seville innocently said that in that case, Holt was also special to him, making Holt realize he had misunderstood. Then Seville suddenly remembered, saying he probably liked Rue more, which made Holt feel a bit sad, but she still patiently advised him. Holt requested morning magic charging, but the horrifying memories made Seville's hand freeze. He ran away in confusion to find Zero. At Zero's house, he was reassured and invited to sit and drink tea. He explained that his memories had returned, though he didn't know why. Zero believed this was dangerous, but also proof that he was gradually maturing, no longer an empty shell. Zero advised him to face his memories and become stronger to protect everyone. Seville also revealed his mother's instruction that he should stay away from a witch with eyes like his own. Zero smiled, her eyes lighting up as she revealed the truth. These special eyes were inherited from her father, who was also the father of number 13. That person was the witch number 13, his brother. Zero explained that among them, number 13 was the only relative left, because he could destroy the entire world. Seville's birth was originally to prepare for her, as Zero's magic was depleting. Number 13 had sought out Seville's mother, using his own bloodline to create a child with infinite magic. He intended to give that power to Zero, but Seville's mother discovered this and fled with her child. Zero felt guilty, but Seville comforted her, saying it was thanks to her that he was born. This made Zero laugh, saying he was the most beautiful thing number 13 had left behind. Seville wanted to know more about his father, and Zero told him that he was extremely rational to the point of extremism, having caused a war in the witch world. Seville recalled that morning when he had hesitated to share magic with Holt, fearing she would die. He decided to become a magic provider at least until the end of the internship, then asked Zero for training. Zero agreed and began a magic circulation exercise. Just as Seville was holding her hand to transfer magic, he heard a scream, but Zero didn't allow him to be distracted, reminding him that he needed to control before wanting to help teammates. Meanwhile, Rue sat by the riverbank trying to forget Seville's words about liking her. Holt suddenly appeared behind her and recounted that story. Rue was startled and fell into the river, then told her not to talk nonsense. Holt anxiously asked if she would run away, having heard that if a witch receives a confession from a student, she would keep her distance. Indeed, Rue had intended to leave, but Holt hugged her and whined, making her promise not to go anywhere until the internship ended. The scream from the hospital made them rush there immediately. They found Cud injured and the judge pinning down the little boy who had been rescued from the forest. Holt shouted for him to let go, and he immediately released his grip. The child grabbed a sharp fragment and lunged at Rue, but she calmly called out his real name, then tied him back to the bed. Cud suspected he had been sent by the church. At that moment, a woman appeared, Rue's former teacher, bringing lunch for the patients, both the judge and the child. This made Rue believe the child was just bait from the church intended to ignite hatred in the village. While they were discussing, the red-haired woman taught the judge how to behave. He didn't care, only wanting to eliminate his target. When he threatened to strangle her, he encountered the teacher's staff and had to back off. Afterward, the red-haired woman took him on a tour of the village. The tiger brother also arrived, and seeing that the attacker was just a child, he didn't torture him. Cud protested vehemently, but the tiger brother left the interrogation to the priest. As the priest prepared to question the boy, he was suddenly attacked but luckily dodged. It turned out the child had regained consciousness and heard everything. The priest made him answer in darkness, relying on facial expressions and breathing to distinguish lies. But in the end, they couldn't extract any important information. Rue concluded that high-ranking church officials must be involved, using disaster remnants as bait to secretly instigate war, so they needed to be extremely cautious. Holt overheard everything outside the door, unhappy that the adults were making decisions on their own. She walked around the village, then went to the school and saw the judge teaching children how to weave baskets. The teacher explained it was just a fish trap. But for Holt, the terrifying memories of him and the sea of flames from years ago came flooding back, hurting her and making her determined to keep watch. The children weren't afraid of him at all. Holt snorted, asserting that the villagers weren't afraid of anyone. Meanwhile, Cud received a message from Lily's mouse reporting that the transfer of the child to Weenia's had been postponed, frustrating him and making him decide to take the child out. The little boy complained that he could have died as a hero and left his name in history books. But in the end, they let him continue living. He had always believed that witches and fallen beasts were evil beings that needed to be eliminated. So when he realized things weren't as he had thought, his disappointment grew even greater. Seville felt both pity and sadness seeing his distorted worldview at such a young age. So he took him to the church and gave him food prepared by Lily. The little boy enjoyed it so much that he seemed addicted to those dishes. However, when Seville removed Lily's hat and revealed that he had just eaten meals cooked by a mouse, his face turned pale with fear. Lily panicked and apologized repeatedly, making the little boy also feel guilty for being rude to her. Afterward, Seville took him to a clean, quiet room to rest. But the little boy remained suspicious, thinking the people in the church were deliberately deceiving him, as he had been taught that witches and fallen beasts were originally evil demons. That evening, Seville excitedly showed Zero that he had successfully practiced and could use light spells very effectively, even dividing the light into different shapes simultaneously. His friends gathered around and were extremely excited, everyone wanting to try it themselves. So they asked to borrow the Luden's staff for an experiment, as trying directly on a person would be too dangerous. Rue agreed without hesitation, as she valued those with aspirations for improvement. Amidst this, Seville suddenly confessed that he liked her and even wanted to marry her. The unexpected confession momentarily transformed the 300-year-old woman into a shy 17-year-old girl. She thought he was too hasty. Seville dismissed it, telling her to pretend she hadn't heard anything, but saying is easier than doing in his heart. It wasn't something that could be treated as if it had never happened. The church was trying to brainwash the little boy and turn him into a weapon against witches. Waking up from a nightmare, the boy was invited by Holt to go fishing with the village children. They went to the eastern shore, and the boy asked Holt how they could trust someone like the brutal judge. Holt just said that trust had to be proven bit by bit. She herself didn't completely trust him either, but was still willing to give him a chance, as long as the little boy didn't harm anyone. The boy, already confused, was betrayed by his rumbling stomach, making the whole group burst into laughter. But in his eyes, there seemed to be many lingering thoughts. Elsewhere, Rue was suddenly awakened, startled because her nephew had appeared in her room out of nowhere. Seville just wanted to experiment and told her that yesterday he had used knowledge from his father's book to create a potion. Rue looked at it but couldn't understand a single character, while her nephew understood everything. Knowing the writer was Brother 13, Rue immediately understood many things. She was even more surprised when she saw Seville acknowledge that was his father, but showed no reaction to the biggest villain of the century. Seville was only interested in the potion formula containing magic, because if successful, it would restore magic for the user. That's why he insisted on borrowing the Luden's staff. Seville dropped a drop of the potion into the core of the staff, and it immediately shone brilliantly. Ludens then grabbed the test tube, drank it all, and even danced with joy. Rue touched the staff and discovered the magic inside was as strong as 2 sorcerers, astonishing Seville, because when making the potion, he had deliberately restrained its power. Seville was determined to make more potion, but also frankly said he would continue to propose to the teacher. Rue was flustered by his persistence and could only tactfully send him away to focus on keeping watch. At that time, Cud was watching the children play by the river with Holt. The brutal judge, witnessing that scene, remembered his miserable childhood, living under the violence of a father who only taught him how to set traps to survive as a hunter. Once, a nobleman came to hire his father and him to set traps, torture, and hunt escaped slaves. Afterward, members of the Judges Association killed that nobleman and recruited him into the church's anti-witch army. Back to the present, he chatted with Hulseful. She was from the north, her homeland destroyed by witches, yet she chose to live peacefully with them. As Hulseful played with the children, Holt approached, saying he had fallen for the young teacher. Just then, they saw the boy walk into the river with the appearance of a zombie. The judge immediately sensed danger and shouted for everyone to stay away. Right after, the boy's stomach burst open, and from inside grew a huge mouth full of teeth. The judge rushed forward and kicked the monster, intending to punch it to death, but it grew 2 cleaver-like limbs that sliced off his arm. He then hugged the young teacher tightly and jumped out of the river. Holt tried to use sleep magic, but the monster wasn't affected, probably because the boy was completely unconscious. More hideous mouths continued to grow on its body. The judge realized that what the boy had brought wasn't just a monster, but an extremist faction's death soldier. He told everyone to run, leaving him to face it. But Holt knew he wasn't strong enough and didn't have any weapons. She bravely led the children away so they wouldn't be distracted. As the monster approached, Holt told the judge to hold it tightly so she could recite a spell. The judge risked his life gripping its 2 cleaver limbs, keeping a distance but still getting stabbed through. By the time Holt finished her lengthy spell, the judge had sacrificed 1 leg. The magic erected 4 stone walls surrounding the monster, but it wasn't enough to contain it. With no other option, they had to choose to kill both the boy and the monster. The judge lunged forward to shield with his body. Holt still hesitated, but Cud was decisive, cutting off his tail for a final sacrifice summoning. The prolonged spell made everyone anxious, while the judge thought he had been abandoned. Fortunately, Cud still retained some humanity and healed his wounds. Just when they thought it was over, hundreds of fly trap-like organisms poured out from the burnt remains of the monster, horrifying everyone. The judge had lost so much blood that he couldn't run. The two children had to support him. Suddenly, he realized something, pressed both their heads to the ground, and told them to be quiet. Rue had appeared. She invited Ludens to have a light meal, and it just opened its tooth-filled mouth and swallowed all the unfortunate beetles in one gulp. After the tragic death of the boy, Seville, Cud, and Holt silently took care of the funeral. During this time, Seville bowed his head for a long time, promising himself that he wouldn't let anyone else die unjustly. Amid that heavy sky, suddenly the roar of a dragon echoed. From afar, the dragon-breaking king descended on a fire dragon, bringing a decree from the kingdom of Wenius. This village would soon become a battlefield. All three were startled, each understanding that the bloody storm had come very close. Without delay, the group hurried back to the village to meet Zero and clarify the situation. Zero calmly welcomed them, saying that if the students didn't return as ordered by the academy, all would be expelled immediately. Cud and Holt still affirmed they would stay to help, but Zero just repeated that this was a challenge they shouldn't interfere with. Seville, with a face full of determination, interrupted, saying if he had to choose, he would rather drop out of school than abandon the villagers. He believed that a sorcerer doesn't just study to pass exams, but lives to protect. The academy had strict rules that apprentice witches and sorcerers were absolutely not allowed to engage directly in combat. They were only permitted to set traps, restrain enemies, but not to kill. Seville thought for a while, then asserted that if traps were cleverly designed, just one would be enough to neutralize 10 enemies. Thus, even an army of thousands could be stopped. Seville's way of speaking made everyone fall silent. For the first time in the conversation, Zero showed a bit of interest. Seville didn't just talk. He took out a bottle of magic potion from his coat, a shimmering solution emitting a strange light. This was the result of his research. Zero narrowed her eyes to test it, and immediately acknowledged that his ability far exceeded expectations. She frankly promised that if Seville truly made contributions in this battle, he would not only avoid expulsion, but might also be recognized as a graduate immediately. As soon as she finished speaking, Rue jumped up, excitedly declaring this would be the graduation project for these students. Zero immediately stopped Rue, emphasizing that this was the academy's decision, unrelated to outsiders. But Rue wouldn't give in. She hardened her face, asserting that if the students were recalled to school, she would leave too, because by now she had come to love this village. Rue even pretended to be on the verge of tears, making Zero just hold her head in frustration. Finally, Zero reluctantly promised to discuss with the principal about a special consideration. Indeed, the news sent immediately caused a sensation. The principal read the plan to end the war without casualties proposed by Zero, seeing this as a rare opportunity to put the anti-witch faction in its place, while proving the righteousness of the academy. She sent the wolf to command the church and the magic corps, coordinating with allies to protect the village. Upon his return, the wolf immediately tried the potion Seville offered. Just one drop significantly restored magic, leaving her unable to hide her amazement. When asked, she learned the formula came from the book written by Seville's father. Hearing this, both friends widened their eyes, as the identity of his father was none other than the infamous switch number 13 in history. This truth was like a heavy shock, making everyone silent for a moment. Meanwhile, Hulsful invited the judge to class so the students could thank him. The brutal uncle, accustomed to growling, now stood speechless before the innocence of the children. Recognizing this awkwardness, the teacher quickly put a candy in his mouth, slightly easing the atmosphere. The small party ended, and when only the two of them remained, the young teacher tried to move closer, her eyes sparkling with trust. She clearly sensed that the judge was moved, but he quietly turned away. In his heart, he told himself he wasn't worthy of something called love. He went to the inn and happened to meet young Holt eating there. The girl teased him, saying the old uncle still knew how to feel embarrassed about romance. After a few jokes, Holt returned to the main topic of war. She affirmed that Seville's plan placed a lot of responsibility on the judge, as his traps would be a crucial link. Although personally she didn't like trusting him that much. After he risked his life to save people, she had to open her heart to give him another chance. That night, the judge sat silently, his heart a mess. Past crimes kept tormenting him. The future was uncertain, making him unsure where he belonged. The next day, the villagers collectively set up traps, reinforcing every entrance and exit. Zero discussed strategy with the students, while Rue and the Tiger Brother affirmed that if the enemy was too strong, they would have to fight to the end. The priest entered, bringing information that the enemy forces reached 10,000. but most were just brainwashed farmers. The anti-witch faction's plot was clearly to force witches to attack ordinary people, turning them into villains in the eyes of the world. Lily ran in calling the Tiger Brother to distribute food. The priest took the opportunity to advise her to evacuate with the villagers, but Lily stubbornly shook her head, asserting she would stay to protect him. Hearing this, the priest suddenly felt emotional, wishing he had an adorable little sister like the mouse girl. Rue and the Tiger Brother didn't miss the chance to think nonsense, and were immediately reprimanded by the priest for their dark minds. While Lily and the Tiger Brother were busy, Rue brought the monster specimen from the boy's stomach for the priest to examine. He frowned as he analyzed it. This creature had the ability to replicate infinitely. If not controlled, it would devour the entire continent. The extremist faction must certainly have had a way to control it before releasing it, but even many high-ranking officials in the church were unaware. This could only mean that the person behind it was the mastermind. That evening, the group gathered to thoroughly check the plan. Seville suddenly stood up, telling Zero to take all his magic if needed, not for her own benefit, but because she bore the responsibility of bringing peace between witches and humanity. Zero was silent for a moment, then nodded, taking Seville's hand. The amount of magic transferred made her dizzy. Even when fully charged, Seville still seemed to have an infinite surplus. Zero quickly let go before she exploded, then smiled and bestowed upon Seville the title of Abyss Sorcerer. The group erupted in joy, congratulating Seville for finally having his own magical title. But the joy didn't last long, as Zero warned that if they lost this battle, all would be expelled from school. Meanwhile, Rue had left the village early in the morning, silently scouting the enemy forces. The enemy forces approached with tremendous strength, not only numerous but also well-equipped, alongside fallen beasts and monsters. As Rue observed, she silently hoped that her friend in heaven was watching to witness this dramatic battle. Very quickly, that army advanced close to the village, but unexpectedly encountered Lily's mice. The chubby mice swarmed in to attack, forcing them to change their route. To their surprise, the new path was filled with traps everywhere. Looking back, an entire army had been cut into pieces, screams of pain echoing everywhere. At that moment, a blue rain fell from the sky, healing all the soldiers, quickly restoring their limbs and wounds. When they noticed the inscriptions carved on tree trunks, the army realized that the witches were merely toying with them. Another group of soldiers was greeted with fire traps, leaving their bodies burned but not severely injured. Only their armor and clothes scorched. The commander immediately understood that the witches had shown mercy, sparing their lives, so he ordered a retreat. However, the real danger still lay with the leader of the entire army, a monster possessed by a demon. Upon receiving the report, Zero informed the group that all the miscellaneous troops had retreated after being trapped. The students cheered joyfully, but Zero immediately reminded them that a greater threat remained the demon-possessed monster and the fallen beasts approaching. Seville wondered how powerful this monster was, and Zero explained that demon possession was an evolved form of fallen beasts. They could use magic without incantations and never tired. The priest and the Tiger Brother immediately competed to finish it off. Just then, terrible news arrived. Lily had been captured. The priest panicked and rushed to save her. Lily had fallen into the hands of the demon-possessed creature and its pack of fallen beasts. They had trapped her in a net, intending to take her back to the village to eat her in front of the villagers as a show of power. The monster laughed with delight imagining such a scene. But before they could carry out their plan, the steel net was shredded by the priest's strike, freeing Lily. The fallen beasts were quickly dealt with by him. The demon-possessed creature lunged forward to devour Lily, but the priest swung his scythe in time, chopping off its arm. Lily ran in terror to hide behind him. The demon-possessed creature was astonished to find that the wound on its arm couldn't regenerate because the scythe had been blessed with Holy Spirit, becoming its perfect nemesis. The demon-possessed creature was forced to cut off the injured part of its arm, then regenerated immediately. Just then, the Tiger Brother appeared, taking down many mercenaries with just a few moves. But the demon-possessed creature used its power to instantly revive the minions, turning them into obedient walking corpses. The priest immediately told Lily to flee so he and the tiger could handle the battle. Meanwhile, the rest of the fallen beast pack had advanced to the village gate, but was also eliminated by the hidden traps. Recognizing the three young mages as promising sorcerers, their leader mobilized 500 troops to attack simultaneously. At that very moment, the brutal judge appeared, sweeping the battlefield in a sea of blood. Zero also quickly arrived with her students to confront them. Following her orders, volleys of magic arrows rained down, causing the fallen beasts to hurriedly seek shelter. Although somewhat disappointed by the overwhelming number of enemies, Zero still encouraged her students to adapt to the situation. The battle became intense, with mercenaries charging forward. The judge threw a bottle of magic potion, causing the ground to sprout vines that tightly bound the enemies. One escaped and tried to capture the 3 students, but was pumped full of magic by Seville, causing him to explode. Holt wasn't to be outdone, using a rain of fire to burn down a group of fallen beasts. Having successfully controlled wide area fire magic for the first time, she was both excited and worried, fearing she had gone too far. Cud went down to treat the wounded, causing the enemy to become even more confused. Just then, a violent sound echoed from afar. It turned out the Tiger Brother and the demon-possessed creature had fought their way to the village gate, battling fiercely, even destroying the wooden fence. The Tiger Brother severed the monster's arm and cut across its throat, but it recovered instantly. Out of options, the Tiger Brother had to call on his witch sister. She warned him to move away as soon as she gave the signal. She began to chant, opening a huge green gate in the sky. When the Tiger Brother retreated, the demon-possessed creature was immediately dragged up by hordes of zombies from the earth, biting off chunks of flesh. It screamed, then was reduced to a dry skeleton within minutes. The scene horrified Seville and his friends. The witch cancelled her spell, sternly saying this was precisely why powerful witches and sorcerers could destroy the world if they lost their way. The battle ended, and the mercenary soldiers withdrew. The principal and allies watched from afar, as happy as if attending a performance. They even invited the 7 church leaders to join the celebration. Meanwhile, a bishop betrayed himself by knowing too much about the monsters. He was exposed, though he tried to deny it. Suddenly, small monsters rushed out from the forest, causing panic. The bishop boasted about having a way to protect everyone, but was quickly exposed when he himself became the target. Everything suddenly turned into a joke. It was just an illusion created by Rue to reveal his true face. She forced the bishop to swallow monster eggs, making him tremble with fear until he finally submitted. Rumors of the battle spread throughout the south, becoming a subject of mockery. An army of 10,000 unable to defeat a single village. That bishop was also cursed for bringing monsters to the south. The principal summoned the 3 students and awarded them graduation certificates for their outstanding achievements. The children were stunned, thinking it might be another test. After being reassured, they asked if there were stable jobs after graduation. The principal confidently said she had prepared appropriate positions, a journey to the Forbidden Library in the north to collect information about disaster remnants. The trio returned to the witch village to pack their belongings. Zero gave Seville his father's book, wishing him a smooth journey ahead. They bid farewell to everyone and began a new adventure with many challenges waiting ahead.